Let's talk about the number system. If you've ever heard of a chord progression talked about using numbers, or let's say you've seen one written out using Roman numerals, that's the number system. And it's basically a musical shorthand that exists to make sense of the chords of a key. And it's a really useful thing that you don't actually have to have that much music theory under your belt to understand. You just have to memorize a few different things. The first thing that the whole number system builds off of is the fact that every single key has the exact same pattern. So once we start playing in that key, there is a certain number of chords, and some of them are major, some of them are minor, and it never changes. The pattern is exactly the same no matter what key we're playing in. The second thing that you need to remember is that anytime we're talking about key, we're really talking about a major scale. So you need to be able to play the major scale, this one. There it is in G. Now what we're going to do is we're going to break that scale up into scale degrees, or steps of the scale, and there are 7 of them. Starting with the first one, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the 8th step is the first step repeated again an octave higher. So it's the first step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So all we do to play the chords of a key is put a chord to each step of the scale. So those numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, each one of those is the root of its very own chord. So how many chords are there in all the keys? There are as many chords as there are notes in the scale, so there's 7 chords. There you go. There's 7 chords, period, in every single key, and that's it. I picked the key of G for this video. Doesn't matter. All the keys are exactly the same. What that means is you can move everything I'm about to show you anywhere on the neck, and it's always going to be exactly the same. But G is a good key for guitar, so we're going to stick with that. So I showed you how to play it right there, but what I want us to do now is play the same scale on one string, just on the E string, all the way up from G right here to G an octave higher. So remember the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Starting from G, we're going to go up a whole step, we're going to go up another whole step, then we're going to go up a half step. Whole, whole, half. Then we go up a whole step. We go up a whole step. Another whole step. And then our last half step. That's whole, 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 half. So there's that classic major scale formula that you need to have memorized. You need to memorize this. Whole, whole, half. Whole, 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 half. So the reason that I'm showing you this all on one string instead of going up the neck this way is because we're going to build a bar chord over every single one of these notes, starting with the G major bar chord, the 1 chord. So this is the pattern that you need to memorize. The first chord is always major. Now this is the chord that is built from the first step of the scale. It's just a major chord. The 2 chord is always minor. Now this is the chord that is built from the 2nd scale degree. It's always minor. The 3 chord is always minor. This is the chord built from the 3rd step of the scale. Always minor. The 4th chord is major. Now we're on the 4th step of the scale. We got a major chord. The 5th chord, also always major. This is the chord that starts on the 5th step of the scale. And we're just playing basic major and minor chords here, nothing fancy. The 6th chord, always minor. This is the chord that starts on the 6th step of the scale. Now, the 7th chord is minor, but it's kind of a wonky one. This one is called minor half diminished, and we're not going to get too much into the theory of why this is called a half diminished chord. I'm just going to show you how to play it, and you just need to know that it's slightly different, even though it is a minor chord. There isn't a great way to play a minor half diminished bar chord, so I'll show you a little bit of a compromise. What we're doing is we've got our 4 fingers lined up. They're on 4 strings adjacent to each other, and we just go a half step down the line. So this is 12th fret, this is 14th fret, 15th, 16th, 17th with these 4 fingers. And then with our first finger, we're barring 14th fret on the high E string. We're skipping the B string. This is a note that we don't want to have in this chord. So we're just playing the E, A, D, G, and high E strings. Now, This is probably the chord in every single key that gets used the least amount of times. Most music, you never see this chord ever. You just kind of need to know that it exists. The 7th chord is called minor half diminished. And then we get up to our 1 chord again. So what we've done is we've broken down the chords of a key into this pattern. It goes major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor half diminished. Now, there's a couple ways to remember this. The easiest one is by far, there's only 3 major chords in every single key. It's the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. And so what that means, again, is the first step of the scale, we build a major chord. The 4th step of the scale, we build a major chord. And then the 5th step of the scale, we build a major chord. You've heard this progression a million times. It's been in pop music for decades. Right? It's all of the blues. Right? That's 1 to 4. And then it goes up to the 5. So the 1, 4, 5 is a really catchy, sort of easy thing to remember, that those are the only 3 major chords in the whole key. So think about that. There's always 3 major chords in every single key, and everything else is minor. The 2 chord, the 3 chord, the 6th chord, and the 7th chord is minor, even though that one's minor half diminished. So I've showed you how to play the chords of G major up the E string using bar chords. Let's look at something a little bit more practical, because you're not always going to want to move your entire hand all the way up and down the neck playing bar chords. Let's look at spread triads, my favorite. Starting with the 1 chord, again, that's the chord that starts on the first step of the G major scale. That's always going to be major, right? 1 chord is always major. We go up to the 2 chord, that's the one that starts on the 2nd step of the scale. 2 chord's always minor. Up to the 3 chord, 3 chord's also always minor. Up to the 4 chord, 4 chord's always major. 5 chords also always major. 6 chords always minor. And then here's a much more practical, way easier way to play a half diminished chord. Here we go. We've got 7th step of the scale, right? That's the scale degree that the 7th chord starts on. And there we go, we're back to G. So if we're going to talk about the chords of a key using numbers, we got 1, because it starts on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. So every single chord in every single key can be given a number, and then you can whip out chord progressions on the fly, and everybody in the room can all be on the same page. Instead of saying, okay, play me G major, D major, E minor, C, you could just say, play me a 1, 5, 6, 4 in the key of G. And then someone goes, oh, how about a 1, 2, 3, 4 in the key of G? And then a vocalist walks into the room and she says, I can't sing in the key of G, I can only sing in the key of D. Everybody goes, okay, that's fine. Let's just move the key to D. Same chord progressions. Let's do a 1, 5, 6, 4. We're in D now. How about a 1, 2, 3, 4 in the key of D? Basically, it's a way of simplifying a chord progression into this little shorthand of just calling it a couple numbers. So, things you need to know. You have to know the major scale. That's the underlying thing about all of this, is that we're just talking about a scale and then building chords. And the roots of those chords are the steps of the scale. So the 1 chord uses the first step of the scale. The 2 chord uses the 2nd step of the scale, and so on. And then you just have to memorize this pattern. It goes major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, minor half diminished 7. That's all you got to know. You need to know the major scale, you need to know that pattern, and then anywhere you place that major scale, that's essentially what key you're playing in, and then you just follow that pattern, boom, you've got all of the chords of that key. So this is an incredibly useful thing. I use it all the time talking to my musician friends. You just say, oh yeah, what if we go to the 4 here? Or what if we go to the 5? What if we make the 5 minor? This kind of language is really common among musicians, so it's a great thing to have sort of an understanding of, is the number system. Okay, hit me up with any questions you got if this was confusing at all. I always want to hear from you guys. And yeah, I'll catch you next time. Peace out.